Now welcome to another lightning response video, where today we once again have a couple related questions, and we will begin with this one from Sergeant AJ, who asked, "Hey Thor, I recently watched a show and one of the characters said something that I think explains what the Jedi are supposed to be. Autobots do not inflict harm unless all other options have been exhausted. It is what separates us from the Decepticons." This is a quote from Optimus Prime in Transformers Prime, when he was lecturing his medic, Ratchet, for breaking protocol by doing harm to a Decepticon when none was necessary. Personally, I think this quote fits with what the Jedi are supposed to be, as they are taught to only defend themselves or others instead of attacking or killing unarmed opponents, which I think separates them from Sith Lords or dark side users. I would like to know your thoughts on this quote and this idea in general. And I have never seen Transformers Prime. I'm a big fan of the original Transformer cartoon, the G1 cartoon from back in the 80s. And this certainly sounds like an Optimus Prime quote, and it sounds like a really good one that I do agree with you 100% does sum up the Jedi and Sith dichotomy quite well. You could almost replace the words Autobots and Decepticons with Jedi and Sith, and I think it works perfectly. I think it fits right alongside the quote from Yoda in The Empire Strikes Back, maybe the best quote about what a Jedi should be, when he tells Luke that the Force is for knowledge and defense, that Jedi only defend, they don't attack. And that in some ways maybe makes the Jedi, in the eyes of some, boring. It makes stories about them boring because they are always going to seek a non-violent alternative and only use Force, or the Force, or both, when absolutely necessary. And I honestly think this leads to a problem when some people want to tell stories about Jedi or using Jedi where they don't really want to beholden themselves to the true core of what a Jedi is supposed to be. I think we could argue we see something like that in The Acolyte, where we're not really seeing the Jedi at their best. We always see the worst of the Jedi in these shows and movies. And though I would love to see a show about the Jedi and about how they should act, or about the not necessarily perfect Jedi, but about a Jedi who upholds their values and never seeks to use Force unless necessary and is always trying to find a peaceful resolution. I would love to see a show like that where Jedi perhaps just roams the galaxy. A Qui-Gon Jinn-like Jedi who maybe has kind of detached himself from the Council, you could say, and just does what he feels is right always. I would love to see a show like that, but I do think people would find it maybe a bit on the boring side. However, I look at something like Star Trek, for example, or the Star Trek series, or The Next Generation, which I loved as a kid as well. And that is a good example of a show where not a lot of action when you really think about it. They're always trying to avoid fighting, obviously. And yet what makes it really good are the moral quandaries they find themselves in. I've joked before about doing a series of videos called "What Would the Jedi Do in This Situation?", where people suggest a certain situation that a Jedi might find themselves in, and then I give my take, and of course everybody in the comments can give their take. Or I could even do a poll asking what people think about this situation. How do you think a Jedi would actually handle it? But anyway, I think that is a great quote. I think it begins to sum up the Jedi perfectly, that they are always trying to be hands-off. They are never trying to interfere or tell people how to live or what to do. They only act when someone or something is harming others, and thus the defense part of the little speech from Yoda kicks in about knowledge and defense, never attack. Most of the time, according to George Lucas himself, they just act as ambassadors or mediators. They settle disputes for people. They don't take a side in the dispute. They look at both sides and try to come to the best resolution for both sides. And if one side isn't going to play ball, well then, yeah, maybe they do need to pull out a lightsaber. But not until there is a real threat or a real danger to people. Otherwise, they're just going to sit back and try to figure out a peaceful resolution. I also think Optimus Prime probably would have made a pretty damn good Jedi. Alright, let's also do this related question from Shannon McElroy, who asked, "Hey Thor, one of my favorite ideals set by the Jedi has always been the rule of loving without exclusion for some over others. Hopefully I'm getting the philosophy intended, as from my view the meaning of this is to respect and value the well-being of everyone equally with no favoritism, and to accept both the good and the bad you experience with them as long as they are not infringing on the rights of others. It's an ideal that, while difficult to practice in real life, is one that I feel we haven't had enough of in this world for at least some time." These days, it seems we are encouraged to be as selective as possible in choosing those you associate with and come to know as people. If someone doesn't immediately agree with you or has reservations about certain things that you value or believe in, they're immediately cast out of the conversation or group they were once a part of without any interest in hearing their point of view. I feel like these expectations have caused most of the social problems we see today, with little good coming out of them, but that hasn't stopped anyone from reconsidering how this is affecting themselves and the people they treat this way. I understand that, unlike Jedi, we all have individual desires and relationships we value above all others, but the big question for me is, why hasn't this been recognized as the detriment it is to everyone, and what can we do to mitigate it in our daily lives? And that is a great question, or questions, and you do sum up the philosophy of the Jedi quite well at the start there. They really are just trying to help when and where needed, and not trying to really insert themselves where they're not needed. And I think that is a problem a lot of people do have today. They feel like they're going to solve everybody else's problems, or the minute they don't agree with something you say, you are a problem they need to solve. I guess you could look at it that way too. And though I don't want to go too deeply into this topic here, it would probably make a good Sunday conversation video now that I think about it. But I think a big problem or a big culprit is the internet. I mean, when it was first coming out, and well, I mean, that sounds strange to say when it was first coming out, but when it was first getting big, and mind you, I'm old enough to remember life well before the internet, but there was this weird promise that the internet was going to change the world. It was going to connect all of us, that it was going to usher in this new age of sharing information, and we would get along and it would be this glorious thing. And though certainly that has happened to a degree thanks to the internet, I have met people from virtually every corner of the world from doing this on YouTube. I've befriended people that I would have, of course, never ever met or known existed if not for the internet, and I'm very thankful for the internet in that respect. But at the same time, this promise of sharing information and cooperating has also led to the problem of, or pitfall of, the fact that it is easy to ignore information we don't want. It is easy to find people who are saying exactly what we want to hear and then to only listen to them, and to ignore or even villainize people saying things we don't want to hear. And a lot of the times, the things they're saying are not necessarily bad, they just don't perfectly align with our own beliefs or values, and they probably, if we would take a moment to examine them, are not bad in and of themselves. They just don't fully align with what we think. And this goes back to the Jedi, of course, where they have learned to accept the fact that people are going to live how they want to live, and that you should only intervene when there is no other choice. We could learn a lot from the Jedi, I have said that before. I certainly don't think we should live just like them. I'm not saying give up attachments. I'm not saying do anything like that. But the Jedi, above all else, try to respect you as an individual and respect your beliefs. And again, will only intervene if what you are doing is harming others and genuinely harming others. We have a way of thinking a lot of things we do today are harming people, when in a manner of speaking, perhaps they are. Perhaps they're hurting your feelings, or perhaps you don't like what people say. But in all reality, they're not inflicting actual harm upon you. You are only interpreting it as harm because it is outside of your sphere that you have created, if that makes sense. When in reality, they're not really trying to hurt you. They're trying to be themselves and trying to live by their values, which in all reality probably are not all that dissimilar from yours if you strip it all back. We pretty much all want the same things out of life. All people pretty much just want to live a good life. Yes, some people are a little more selfish than others, which is a problem. That is what Star Wars tries to address. As I've said before, balance in Star Wars is kind of people just getting along and not taking more than they need. That is why Sith cause imbalance, because they take everything they can possibly get their hands on. But anyway, before I ramble on, I do agree with you. I think people need to be a little more Jedi-like. I think they need to stop and ask themselves, why am I getting so mad at other people all the time? Is it because there is something really bad that they are doing? Are they really bad people? Or have I been convinced they are bad because they are not in my immediate sphere of beliefs or values or whatever it might be? And that in all reality, they probably, again, want the same things out of life I do. They're just going about it a little differently. And if maybe I respect that fact about them, they will respect my beliefs and values, and we can, get along. What a crazy thought. Well, I think that's going to be all I got for you this time. Now it is your turn to take to the comments below and tell me what you think about anything I had to say here about my little ramble. Or, of course, you can always ask a question for a future lightning response video. You start your comment off with "Hey Thor," and then you ask your question. And hopefully I can get to it in a future video. I've been getting a ton of them lately, a ton of questions, which I am very thankful for. I appreciate it, but of course I can't get to them all. Whatever the case may be though, leave a comment below. Let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.